this video, I'm going to be talking about why Kanopy is one of the greatest streaming services for film buffs and movie lovers from around the world. And my name is Robert Bellissimo. I'm with Coffee with Aliens at the Movies, which is a film channel dedicated to entertaining people as well as educating them on all things movies. So today I want to talk about Kanopy, which again is one of the greatest streaming services that I've ever discovered, and it is almost too much to handle because of the wealth of material that is on there, and I don't even want to miss anything, so I took some notes about some of the things that you can find on there, the sections that are on offer. You have Criterion movies, and they have a mass collection of Criterion collection films, documentaries, world cinema, award-winning filmmakers in profile, which are documentaries on a bunch of your favorite directors, music and blues documentaries, food and wine favorites, rom-coms, economics, Oscar winners, LGBTQ cinema directed by women, true stories, Canadian cinema. So that's just some of the options that are available on this amazing educational platform, which, I mean, I can't recommend enough, and it's free. The only downside is you can only watch 8 things a month, and it's really not just for movies. They also have a lot of documentaries that are for educators. Like I mentioned, a whole section dedicated to economics or music and blues. So it's not just for movie people, it's for people who are studying anything, really. I mean, it would be hard to not find some kind of topic of interest. They have things on animals, it's just unbelievable how much is on there. I have a watch list of probably 200 movies that I still haven't even gotten to. That's how much is on there. So if you have a library card, in most countries, Kanopy is offered. So today I'm also just going to be talking about 3 films that I absolutely love that are on Kanopy that I think all filmmakers and actors should see. Number 1 is The Wanderers. Now, I saw The Wanderers 8 years ago. It was free on YouTube. Came out in 1979 to a limited release. It was directed by Philip Kaufman. And since then, it did okay. And since then, it started to gain a cult following. And I love films that develop these cult followings over the years that didn't do too well at first. So in 1995, apparently Philip Kaufman's longer directorial cut was released, and it did much better, and to this day it is streamed all over the world to a lot of people showing up and watching this in a movie theater. So I love The Wanderers because it really hits you emotionally. It really brings you into that world, and it's not just about one thing. It's largely about 1963 gangs living in the Bronx in New York, and they're all segregated gangs. You have your Italian gangs, you have your Asian gangs, you have your Jewish gangs, they're all segregated, and they all hate each other. Black gangs especially, it was mainly the blacks against the Italians. So, and they're about to have this big fight at school one day. After school one day, and what happened? So you think, okay, this is going to be about gang wars, but leading up to the fight, a lot of other things happen. You start to get to know these characters. They're from, why do people go into gangs? Well, they're from poor areas. They're from rough homes where they're getting abused, where they're angry, and where they don't see a good future. So they form these gangs, and that's what you really see in the film. So you start to get to know the characters that way and what they're going through and what they're struggling with, and from there it's a coming of age story, falling in love, facing adulthood and graduating high school and looking at the future with fear. So that element of it is just fantastic. And there's a scene that I'll never forget where towards the end, a young man, one of the leads, is following this woman he had an affair with, and she goes into a coffee shop, and Bob Dylan is there singing "The Times Are A-Changing." And what a perfect song to, that things are changing, the world is changing. Now we're going into folk music from doo-wop music that these guys were listening to. Bob Dylan was such a major benefit and influence in the 1960s on America and on young people. So the man is watching Bob Dylan play, and you can see the sadness and the fear of his eyes, knowing that his life is changing. At this point, he's about to get married, his girlfriend's pregnant, and he's scared. And his other friends who are from a more abusive homes are leaving. They're going off to California to get away. They finally stood up to their parents, and they're getting out of there, and they're going to go try to find a new life. So, anyone, I can feel the anxiety just from watching it, and we've all experienced that. And you don't just experience that at 19, you experience that in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, 70s, 80s. Life is always changing, we're always moving, and things are always happening, and that's always the very first, to me, big change that happens, is just getting into adulthood and how hard that can be and what that feels like, and the fear and uncertainty that goes with it. But in the end, of course, it has this harmony of brotherhood, and all the races eventually come together. I don't want to spoil how that happens, but it's a beautiful way to look at racism and say, why are we doing this? We're all human. Let's all be there for each other. And that's exactly what happens. And they at the end, they sing the song The Wanderers, which is from the soundtrack of the film. Again, on a side note, the soundtrack is fantastic for this movie. So I love it, and I liked it even more than when I saw it 8 years ago. I never forgot it. Again, it's a film that just stays with you. Some of the elements of it are comic booky and over the top, some very direct references to Sergio Leone films, but that's okay. I mean, that's the fun of it. It's the innocence of it as well. It also takes some very dark turns, and some of the violence as well is kind of hard to watch at times. So it's just a fantastic film. So if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. And again, free on Kanopy. And I wanted to talk about 2 documentaries, one being by Sidney Lumet. Now, this came out 4 years ago, and it was a fantastic documentary on the life and work of Sidney Lumet. And if you don't know Sidney Lumet, you should. And if you haven't, I don't know what you're doing, because he's one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. He made some of the greatest films of all time: 12 Angry Men, Dog Day Afternoon, Serpico, The Verdict, Murder on the Orient Express. I can go on and on. He worked in theater and then directed on TV and then made a number of feature films. Most of the acting in his films are phenomenal, and the book that he wrote about movies, and that's another must-read, Sidney Lumet Making Movies, he talks about his process, his casting, his rehearsing, and how the theater and TV and film influenced everything in his development as a director. He was also an actor. But the documentary looks closely at his life. His father was an actor. He was from the Yiddish theater. He was a child actor. He was from poverty. His family were moving all the time. He didn't have the greatest relationship with his father. And the documentary is largely these interviews that he did in 2008, 3 years just before he died, where he talks about his whole life and himself as a father, and he goes into his personal life, and he talks about every single movie, and he's very, very honest and direct about that. So a fantastic documentary and a must-see, and if you haven't seen it, again, free on Kanopy. Did I say it? These things were free on Kanopy? Check it out. Absolutely masterpiece. And lastly, how can I not mention Martin Scorsese's A Personal Journey Through American Cinema? Perfect place to be on Kanopy. I remember getting it on VHS years ago from the library and really learning a lot about movies that I didn't know. And Scorsese goes from the beginning of cinema to right until 1970, because that's when he started to make films, and he didn't want to be critiquing his fellow filmmakers. So he just looked at the period from the beginning right till when he started. And he talks about a lot of movies that a lot of people wouldn't know, that you can discover easily. A lot of them I found were free on YouTube. And talks about how the silent films then went into talkies, how directors then started to experiment with structure and lighting, where they were influenced by European filmmakers, how color came into effect. And it's just a wealth of experience and knowledge, and you're learning from one of them. Well, everyone, I'm going to wrap it up there, and I can go on and on about these streaming services. But yes, if you are a filmmaker, editor, actor, cinematographer, photographer, anything to do with media, or you're even a teacher of anything to educate people, this is a must-have streaming service, which again is absolutely free. So please check with your library if you haven't already done so to see if you can get it. I'll probably be doing more videos on Kanopy and reviews and movies to check out, so stay tuned. And if you haven't already done so, please hit the subscribe button in the description box below to see what we're going to be up to. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Take care.